Welcome to Scrolling to Death. I've really been looking forward to today's conversation with former congressional staffer and public policy expert, Patrick Lyden. Hey, Patrick.
Hi, very nice to be talking to you today.
Yeah. So first, let's introduce you to listeners. So tell me a little more about you and what brought you to work in this space.
Yeah, sure. So I have about 20 plus years in federal public policy. I was a congressional staffer, as you said, for a few committees of the House of Representatives. And then I was also a chief of staff to different members of Congress for their personal office. So a wide range of issues in that space, dealing with a lot of education, future workforce, future of technology, and how it all comes together. And so when life and family happens, I became a lobbyist, as a lot of people do in the federal policy space. And I've represented anyone from the smallest startup through Fortune 500 companies. I was a lobbyist for in-house lobbyist for Uber Technologies for a while. So a wide range of experience. And what brought me to this space specifically is, number one, I'm a parent. So I have two daughters, 13 and 11. So we're navigating this space in real time, trying to figure out what should we do as parents and how should we parent. But also, unfortunately for them, I'm in this space, so I know a lot about the issues and the problems and the harms associated with too much social media. So they're pretty locked down and unhappy about it a lot of times when their friends are, their friends are online and engaging. So I work for two clients right now in the online protection space. First, Children and Screens Institute, which is a research-based institution that provides verified, validated research to educators, parents, and policymakers on what is happening with the platforms and what are the potential harms and risks of online activity. And then a online safety app, third-party app called Bright Canary, which allows parents to actively engage with their children and better understand the use of their children on online and social media, and allow them to engage with the children when they find that there might be activity that is potentially harmful or dangerous.
Yeah. You mentioned children and screens, and I've learned a lot about that there's a lack of research on these things, and also that you have to be careful because sometimes it's funded by a big tech company.
Right.
And so it's just nice to have a resource that you know is unbiased, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So when you talked about your kids, so what are some of the decisions that you've made, if you can share with parents that are listening, you and your wife have made when approaching technology after learning all you've learned about this space?
Yeah. Well, seeing a few of your podcasts, I think that delay strategy, we have been really trying to keep them off as much as possible, but it's almost impossible these days because other parents allow their children to be on and be engaged. So we allow them to have text messaging through their iPhone or their iPad, and then also YouTube. It was really hard to avoid YouTube. And in the beginning, my wife and I thought YouTube wasn't that terrible of a platform. Not that it's terrible, but we thought that's probably the safest. But then we realized a lot of the videos and a lot of the things that you see on TikTok are also being uploaded onto YouTube. And if you allow your child free range when they're watching slime videos, which was the gateway for online activity for my kids, they really wanted to see slime videos for some reason. And then, of course, hair and makeup and tutorials and things like that, where people are engaging. When they're free ranging on that app, we found that it's better to understand what they're doing and what they're engaging with. Luckily, YouTube, the algorithms aren't like some of the other platforms, so it's a little bit easier, but it's still something that you can't just let your kids engage in freely without any kind of supervision or understanding of what they're doing.
Right. Right. And it is interesting because people will repost the TikTok videos and even the Instagram reels onto YouTube. And so it's basically like just a TikTok feed or just kind of a conglomerate of all of the videos from all the social media platforms. And that algorithm can change very quickly. So you may look at it initially, and then your kid's been on it for hours over weeks, and
Yeah.
it'll change. Um, and it hooks them in with more of the harmful, shocking content
Yes.
that gets kids to stay on the platform. So yeah, you just have to keep checking. But I have a whole episode on YouTube Kids, actually, because I wanted to see, like, is YouTube Kids okay? And there was some stuff there that was concerning even on YouTube Kids. But yeah,
Yeah, it's surprising that they would have access to body image stuff,
yeah.
or like potential drug and other activities that you just don't want them to be part of.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it is surprising what they're able to access or what's fed to them, and that's I think the genesis of a lot of what's happening in Washington D.C. is trying to protect children
Mm-hmm.
from those harms.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So there is well, the media is calling it a TikTok ban, but it's not really a ban. So can you tell us what's happening with TikTok right now?
Yeah, so the House moved very quickly after some security briefings with the intel
Mm-hmm.
community, the intelligence community, and our our defense apparatus for the United States. And what they did was they put in place a bill. They voted it through committee and then House very quickly, which doesn't happen, particularly in this environment where everything's been hyper partisan and there's been a lot of fighting between the parties and internally within the
Mm-hmm.
Republican Party in particular.
Mm-hmm.
This TikTok bill moved fast through the House, and what it does is it places the onus on ByteDance, which is the owner of the company of
Mm-hmm.
TikTok, and it says that if you do not sell to a U.S. based or domestic based company
Mm-hmm.
or a group of investors and onshore some of that information, then we will mandate that it be banned in the United States. So it's called a ban, but what it's really trying to say is that China and what what the intelligence community feels is a national security risk, that
Mm-hmm.
the government of China is tapping into that information and using that information for
Mm-hmm.
harmful reasons and to collect data. It's
Yeah.
trying to stop them from having access to uh, citizens, United States citizens, information. And so
Mm-hmm.
China and ByteDance could decide to divest in TikTok, and it could continue on as a platform in the United States. If
Mm-hmm.
they choose not to do that, then there will be ramifications.
Okay. And I know during the hearing in January with the big tech CEOs, the TikTok CEO was asked specifically about the data. Is the data from TikTok getting into the hands of the Chinese government? Aren't Chinese companies required to hand over their data to the
Yes.
government?
Yes, it's part of their rules. Their law
Mm-hmm.
mandates that Chinese-based companies provide that information to the government
Mm-hmm.
when needed and when requested.
So the TikTok CEO is trying to say that they've separated the data. The American data is not housed in China, like physically. Is that what what he's trying to convince
That's
us
what
of?
he claimed, but unfortunately, the for him, the intelligence apparatus of the United States is saying otherwise, and that they're basically saying that this is Chinese spyware that is being willingly loaded on
Mm-hmm.
uh, people's phones and children's phones and then used. And we know that a bulk of the users of TikTok, in particular, are younger users,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times minors
Mm-hmm.
and young folks that are using this app.
Yeah. And I read that once you download the TikTok app, say on your phone, any any other devices that are connected to that Apple ID, your MacBook computer, your iPad, it's tracking your activity on all the devices.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
That's concerning.
Yes. And that's why they say it's like spyware, because once you download it, and it also has markers on the internet. So even though I'm not using TikTok and I'm not on TikTok, they
Uh-huh.
could, because there's markers on the internet, they can track me and some of my activity as well.
Okay. And I know one of the concerns was just the influence that it's having on millions of American teens and even preteens and children in their decisions and their opinions and all of that. So I know that's a big concern. And I just found out today, and you have some insight on this, that TikTok is actually offering a pop-up to users. And I'm hearing that it's being served to younger people, not older people, mostly younger people. It's requesting that they contact the representative to let them know that they're not in favor of this TikTok ban.
Yes.
So they've done this previously, right?
That's right. And during the hearings in the House
Mm-hmm.
Energy and Commerce Committee,
Mm-hmm.
House offices were inundated with calls coming in from all ages, mainly young people, saying, "Don't take away my TikTok. I need this. I will, I will die without this app." And so I think it was a huge misfire by the TikTok people, because what it showed the federal lawmakers and
Mm-hmm.
policymakers that, oh, TikTok has this oversized influence and they can compel people to call in. So it backfired a bit because it showed the power of TikTok and how TikTok will influence
Mm-hmm.
young people in particular to take these actions. And unfortunately, I think what a lot of offices, when they receive the calls, when I go in and talk to them, they said a lot of the the children and the young adults that called in were
Mm-hmm.
misinformed about what the bill specifically did and
Yeah.
didn't understand. And so they try to spend some time saying, hey, this is what the actual bill does, and this is the language, and there are options. And no,
Mm-hmm.
TikTok will not just disappear
Mm-hmm.
if ByteDance does the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it backfired on, I think, on ByteDance and TikTok in particular, with showing that they can influence and will use that
Mm-hmm.
influence in a way that isn't necessarily being honest.
Right. And I am also hearing kids are calling saying they're going to commit suicide
Yes.
if they take away TikTok, which just reinforces the issue that
Yes.
no one should be that attached to something that they cannot live without it, especially in an app on their phone.
That's right.
So, okay. So they didn't learn from that in the previous experience and they're just doing it
No,
again.
no. And we'll see what happens. It's been sent to the Senate, and we'll see what happens with the Senate.
Right.
Usually there's a big brother, little brother between the two chambers, the House and the Senate. They
Okay.
don't like to do things exactly right the same way.
Yeah.
And so we'll see what the Senate does and how they consider it. But with such a compelling vote in the House, I think there will be pressure to try to move it in the Senate as well.
Okay. And if it passes in the Senate, then it goes to President Biden, and he has stated that he would sign it into
That's
law,
correct.
right? Okay. What do we have a timeline on any of that?
No.
Okay. When they feel like it.
Yeah, and look, the legislative process is already complicated right now
Mm-hmm.
with the
Mm-hmm.
way things have been happening this Congress in particular. So they're
Mm-hmm.
running out of time. We're now engaging in the political season. The presidential campaign has started up in earnest. And
Mm-hmm.
so that usually shuts down a lot of legislative proposals. So there'll be a few opportunities to move forward. We're hoping
Mm-hmm.
that Leader Schumer in the Senate picks it up and takes it and moves forward with it, along with
Okay.
the other privacy protections and the other child online protection bills that are out there.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about it personally? Like, do you wish it would just go away? Do you think that would be better for kids' mental health states, or do you
Oh,
feel
social media in general.
TikTok? Let's stick
TikTok.
with TikTok for
Yes.
now.
Yes, I do. I have strong feelings about TikTok. I do
Yeah.
take that, being in the public policy space, I do take
Mm-hmm.
the warnings from our intelligence community very seriously. And
Mm-hmm.
when people ask me why, like, what do you care about TikTok? You're not on it. I have seen enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, being in the policy space, I read everything that I can about it. So I do feel very strongly. And even if everyone else in my daughter's high school, she's Alice is our 13-year-old. She's moving on to high school, so her
Mm-hmm.
world is about to get much larger.
Yeah.
And she came from a small class, and so it's going to expand. And even if everyone else has TikTok, she knows she will not get TikTok. She already complains about it now.
Mm-hmm.
It will only get worse in the future when
Mm-hmm.
everyone else is still using it. So if TikTok went away, or um, they cut off ties with China
Mm-hmm.
by you know, being bought by a domestic U.S. company, I
Mm-hmm.
might have different feelings about it, but I'd still probably be very much against it because there's other harms beyond the national security risks. There's the attention deficit that it creates because of those 30-second to 1 minute and 30-second hits. It just programs kids to not be able to pay attention. So
Yeah.
people have called it digital fentanyl from the standpoint that it's kind of melting kids' brains when you think about the content isn't the most wholesome content. And then also that quick hit that kind of mimics what people might feel in gambling or other, adrenaline based things where they're just like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Right.
And even I get wrapped up and I know better. And if I'm on Instagram trying to figure out what my sister's kids did last weekend or their vacation, 45 minutes later, I'm looking at Top Gun videos and like all kinds of weird stuff. And I just blew 45 minutes and I know better. So unfortunately, I feel like a lot of these platforms are meant to draw people in and then keep you there as long as possible, because that's their model to advertise and to provide, to accept, to take that data that you're providing them, and so that they could provide it to advertisers. So their model is to keep you on the platform as long as possible.
Yeah, and it's really affecting their focus. And as parents, we know this, but who really knows this are teachers.
Yes.
And I'm interviewing a lot of teachers right now and administrators and counselors, and it is so concerning. They can't focus for more than a minute on anything at all. And we're seeing that in their educational scores. And we'll talk about ed tech in a minute. I want to get your opinion on that. But it's seeming like with this TikTok thing, we're being reactive rather than proactive in protecting our kids with good legislation. And so what exists currently when it comes to legislation for protecting our kids online?
Well, there are a few probably outdated bills that have been passed, but what you're seeing now is a real push to get things like the Kids Online Safety Act, which is being considered in the Senate right now. And then just this weekend, Senator Cantwell, who's Senate Commerce Chair, and the Energy and Commerce Chair in the House, McMorris Rogers, they released a discussion draft of a larger online privacy and data protection bill called the American Privacy Rights Act. And so I think that's going to be a big vehicle to provide not only children with better protections, but all people that are using online applications for better data privacy. And then I'm hoping that other bills such as COSA, which is a Kids Online Safety Act, and some other bills like Sammy's Law that specifically try to engage and allow parents to engage with online privacy protections and protections of harmful content on the platforms.
Okay. All right. And I know there's been some delays on COSA and some watering down, but I've seen some movement on Sammy's Law, which I really like that one too. That provides parents with, you can put third-party safety software on the kids' phones and get access and alerts when something harmful happens, which right now we don't get access to because the social media companies, don't allow us to
That's correct.
Get that far into their product.
Yeah, allows for a portal so that for parents that want to engage and want to understand and monitor their children online activity, it allows for that. Right now, companies like Bright Canary are doing a pretty good job of figuring out how to do that and provide protections, but they still don't have access to some of the critical platforms such as Snapchat, which is one of the toughest for parents to understand because the messages disappear. Right. Children like to engage on it because those messages disappear. It's the whole point that parents can't go back and read some of their messages and understand what they're doing online. TikTok is another one that would be that is hard to figure out what children are doing. So this would allow that pathway for parents that want to engage. They can either upload and have this software running on their phones, or there's VPN models that allow the software to be uploaded on your child's phone, so
Mm-hmm.
you're getting real-time data and understanding of what's happening with your
Right.
children online.
Okay. Because there are some tools now, like Bright Canary, there's Bark
Yeah.
technologies, and they can monitor the platform. But I know with Bark, you can monitor the text chats, but not any of the photos, which is like it's a photo based
Yes.
product and
Yeah.
they go away anyway. So it kind of defeats the purpose. And the photos is where we're getting the nude stuff going through, the drug menus, all of that harmful content.
That's correct. Yes. And Bark has an application where they can actually monitor the iMessages, which, as I said, a lot of my children's engagement are on iMessage because
Mm-hmm.
we're not allowing them on other platforms.
Right.
And we
Okay.
don't want to read every text message. They're
Mm-hmm.
silly.
Yes.
They're funny.
Right.
They'll melt my brain if I have to read all those messages.
Right.
So I would rather have kind of a flagging tool, and that's what Bright
Mm-hmm.
Canary and I think Bark does something similar where
Mm-hmm.
they have a monitoring and they allow, you have like a dashboard that pops up and it says, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this emoji was sent, or this conversation happened around
Mm-hmm.
suicide or eating disorder or body image
Yeah.
or drugs. You should know about that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think even the most strident um, personal protection, privacy protection folks
Mm-hmm.
would say that, okay, if your child is 10 or 13 or 8 and receiving online pornography or
Mm-hmm.
images that they shouldn't have, that
Mm-hmm.
there should be a protection for that. So I think
Yeah.
there's even an acknowledgement there amongst people that are opposed generally to having parents have full access to their children's online data.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you know about the nude images sending back and forth is more and more of an issue with sextortion schemes, with AI, like even photos are being manipulated with deep fake nude apps to be nude. But I'm hearing about AI functionality that doesn't even allow the nude photo to be shared. So if a child receives a nude photo, like it won't even come through. If someone tries to send it to them, it won't even come through. Or if they try to send one of themselves, it
Mm,
won't go out. I'm hearing that technology exists because I know that some states it's like a felony now to share a nude image of especially a minor, and so you're talking like if a boy sends your teenage son a nude photo and you pass it along, now your son could be charged, or could you be
yeah.
charged? It's your phone. So anyway, I will see what's happening with that kind of technology. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI has the ability, obviously, to create more harms, but it also has the
Mm-hmm.
ability to process so much more information and
Mm-hmm.
understand what's happening that
Yeah.
as technology progresses, I think AI will be instrumental in helping a lot of these platforms perform
Mm-hmm.
better services. And the best thing about it is if you're a parent and you don't want to engage, you don't have to. And
Right.
Sammy's law says you're not forced to engage. It's just for those parents that want extra protections
Mm-hmm.
and will go to their free models. There are paid subscription models, and there's everything in
Mm-hmm.
between. So there's a
Okay.
lot of availability. So hopefully AI will help with some of those issues, particularly as it relates to the nude images.
Right. Okay. All right. So in some states are implementing or trying to implement bans under certain ages. So we have Florida's social media ban for kids under 14. And if you're 14 or 15, you need to get parental approval. Um, how do you feel about that specific ban in Florida?
I think it's probably a good thing. I think what we're going to have to do at some point is we can't do 50 separate laws on
Mm-hmm.
this, and platforms will have
Mm-hmm.
a very hard problem, particularly with geofencing around a state like Florida and
Mm-hmm.
Alabama having totally separate or no laws. They,
Mm-hmm.
or, someone flies to Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it's good the states are experimenting and we could see what works and what doesn't. They always
Mm-hmm.
say that in policy, there's 50 incubators out there, and you can figure out what works and what doesn't work and
Mm-hmm.
what may provide a pathway forward. I think eventually we'll need a federal standard to remove the patchwork, and I think that's what lawmakers are trying to do with this new Privacy Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
That the discussion draft, they talk a lot about removing the different patchwork of legislation and creating one standard that everyone in the United States would adhere to.
Okay.
So I think eventually companies will be clamoring for one standard versus having to do individual standards and then try to figure out how do you do it for this state, not that state, and that kind of thing.
Okay. So first, do you think that this law in Florida will survive the lawsuits that the social media companies will throw at it?
It depends on the courts.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on what court they take it through. If they take it to a more, maybe a little bit more northeastern court that has more progressive views, it may not survive.
Okay. And
it's unclear whether the Supreme Court is willing to take up those types of cases.
Okay. And if it does survive, so how do you think they'll implement age verification for kids that don't have driver's licenses?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there's technology that can solve that. And we know that the platforms know approximately what age their users. They just choose not to implement it. And you see that in what the algorithms feed the minors when they're on, and they're clicking on certain things. So the algorithms are saying, oh, this person likes cartoons and slime videos. Well, they're probably not 18. They're definitely not 49 like me. So they're probably younger. And then you start seeing that the algorithms and the advertisements start feeding towards a younger set. So we know that the platforms have a sense of what age those users are. They just choose not to engage or to do anything about it. So I think there's going to be there's something will have to be done. Age verification is a very sticky issue here in Washington, D.C. at the federal level. Some people support it. Some people don't. A lot of people have problems with it because there may be the possibility that you're stifling free speech, or if a child is trying to learn something that isn't naturally part of their community, that they want to allow kids to be able to find certain information about information that leads to different lifestyles and choices.
Okay, so how do you feel personally about the age limit on social media? Are you in favor of a 14 social media age limit across the nation, or more like 16? What would you prefer?
I think it should be graduated. I like Bright Canaries, the way that they talk about online usage with minors, that an 8-year-old should probably not have that many privacy protections, and that parents should be able to decide what their child can engage and will engage with. I think it was shocking to me. We set up a Google account for each of my children. It started with the 11-year-old and put her on the Google family plan, and we could, ensure that safe search was being used and limit some hours. And then that was a really seamless process. Then I went to put my 13-year-old on, and it said, oh, she's 13. You have to go ask her permission to give you all the logins. And I was like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. And very frustrated about that, that I think it should be more of a hybrid, like, hey, Alice, we're going to give you a little bit more liberty and responsibility. You want to put guardrails around children and allow them to learn how to use the internet in proper uses, healthy uses, so that when they do have, free access, that they have better relationship with online platforms and they have healthier, engagement ultimately. So I think it should be graduated, and like our 13-year-old should have a little bit more freedom than our 11-year-old. And when she turns 16, a little bit more, but to give free reign at 13 seems pretty ridiculous. And I know, I was 13. I remember I would have been doing a lot of crazy stuff on the internet had it been what it is today.
Right. And just the risks are greater, right, than we were 13. And they are given so much privacy with Snapchats, disappearing messages, or Facebook Messenger's end-to-end encryption. I mean, they're able to be in these spaces communicating with strangers and adults in messages disappear. So a lot of kids are just getting harmed and there's no record.
That's right. That's right. And that's what we found with Sam Chapman and his story and his son. I know he was on this podcast, and it's such an impactful story. And Sam and his wife have dedicated their lives to changing that, to make sure that children can be protected, because the police have little recourse against the platforms right now when something does happen. And there's little recourse for parents to try to, protect their children. So we're fighting to change all that.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? So when it comes to the access to drugs on social media, so specifically there's dozens of parents that are suing Snapchat for their children all purchased a pill on Snapchat. They thought it was a prescription pill. It was laced with fentanyl, and they were all poisoned and died. And they're all suing Snapchat. It's currently on appeal, or I think it's been submitted for appeal, and there's maybe a stay coming. It's not looking great. I think the attorney said it's like a 50-50 chance at this point that it'll go to trial. So what do you feel about Snapchat's responsibility in providing a platform that really does allow for drug dealers to contact children and have like evidence destroyed?
Yeah, that is devastating. I mean, we've had to have the conversation with our daughters, which I would have assumed is a little early, that, hey, there's no experimenting with drugs or even drinks now, that fentanyl can provide a deadly dose with, very little substance, actual, size. It doesn't matter. And you just don't know what you're getting from even friends. They may have bought it from something else. And so from somewhere else that is, not a licensed medical operation. So I think I'm very much against the fact that platforms allow that kind of activity on their platforms, and that children can be contacted. If you hear Sam Chapman's story, his son the drug dealer reached out actively to his son and provided a free product, I believe. And so I'm very much against that. And I think platforms should be protecting children and their legal users, not the users that are providing illegal substances or selling guns or providing pornographic material to minors. That should not be, the onus shouldn't be protecting those users. The onus should be protecting the legal users that are on your platform.
Yeah. And it's like a liability problem. So is Snapchat or any social media companies liable for what happens on their platform? And if it was like in the 90s, they were just message boards hosting conversations, that's one thing. But these days they're serving things through algorithm and really influencing people's decisions and activities on the platform. So for me, there's some liability there.
Yeah. And you're starting to see the policy discussion shift from technology based to more product based. And should a platform be considered a product? And if it is a product, just like alcohol or cigarettes or pornography, you should have protections for people on that. So you're starting to see a little of the policy shift towards maybe these platforms are products and not just a technology. And I think there is a understanding that the House and the Senate, Congress, and the administration, when in the infancy of the internet, they had an opportunity to kind of keep some controls and some protections. And a lot of people were like, hey, we can't stifle the innovation. And unfortunately, we're paying a price for that now. And that's why you see such a look at AI in particular, because they don't want to miss the boat again in terms of the policy ramifications. So they want to understand what is happening with AI, what it means, and then how do they provide proper relationship with it between the users and the platforms that are creating it, and making sure that there are more protections for users. So it's interesting to watch them look back and say, we kind of blew it with the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's see what we need to do on
Mm-hmm.
AI.
Yeah, especially when it comes to kids and protecting kids.
That's right.
Okay. So parents are sitting at home feeling like, our kids are not protected and there's not much we can do and all their friends are on it. So we're going to give in. And, I try to empower parents to take control where they can. And so I know we spoke previously and you shared something like, parents' collective voice will be heard and that's where change can happen. So can you explain like how parents can engage with policy to help influence better legislation that protects our kids?
Sure. Well, number one, parents should know there's resources out there like Children and Screens. It's childrenandscreens.org,
Mm-hmm.
and they provide guidance to parents and educators and policymakers. And they provide these 1 page or 2 page kind of here's the data and
Mm-hmm.
here's what we see in terms of the research and here's some practices. So I would encourage parents to actively go out there and seek some of this guidance. There's other organizations that do a really good job of providing guidance specifically because
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to navigate. My wife and I are in the federal public policy space, and we find it challenging. Like, oh, what are we? How many screen hours is good?
Mm-hmm.
Is this
Yeah.
too much? Is this too little? Or
Yeah.
are we being too restrictive? And then the kid goes and just like candy, finds some candy and gorges on it because
Yeah.
you've been too restrictive. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
really find a balance. So that's one part. The other part I would say is parents should realize that they have power in their voice. People like Sam Chapman have gone out there and made it their mission. He comes to
Mm-hmm.
Washington D.C. and he'll talk to any policymaker he can get in front of to say, here are the harms, here's the problem that we experience and the tragedy. Let's
Mm-hmm.
protect others. So you can find those organizations that are active in advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
but parents should also engage with their lawmakers, specifically either at the federal level or the state. You can go to house.gov, Gov,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do a search on your address, and it will tell you who your member of Congress is, and it'll take you to the webpage, and you should call those numbers, and you should say, "Hey, listen, I live in your district. I'm your constituent. I need protections. I want protections."
Mm-hmm.
And that is what will carry the day when members of Congress are hearing from their constituents that they need these protections online.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yes, the online companies have lots of money and they have lots of power here in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
but the constituent voice, the people that are voting for the members of Congress, will carry over that eventually if we can get enough people to engage. So I think they should be engaging, letter writing, write an email,
Yeah.
make a phone call. It's easy.
Right.
Um, and people feel like, oh, it's not that big of an issue, but this is a huge issue. And your voice does matter when it comes to this. They will log. I was a chief of staff for a member of Congress, and we logged every call, and I could
Mm-hmm.
tell how many times someone wrote, someone called. I knew exactly, and I'm like, oh,
Mm.
Mrs. Smith is calling about online protections again. She really cares about these issues. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll find that members will engage with you. They might write letters back to constituents and you'll be on their list. This is what I voted for on online protections. This is what I support in terms of the bills that are
Mm-hmm.
before the House or before the Senate. And you can also call your senator as well. Each state has two. So you have two
Yeah.
opportunities to contact their offices, and they have the same kind of operations where they monitor what's happening and who's talking to them.
Okay. Okay. We can say general things like, I'm just really worried
Yeah.
about my kids' safety online and I need you guys to do something about it. Right.
Parents do
Or,
not need to be a policy expert.
yeah.
You just have to say, I care. I want to engage. Um, I think 13 is too young, or
Mm-hmm.
my son was able to get on TikTok. I didn't want him on TikTok, but here, he circumvented, the age verification. So something needs to be done. You can use your individual experience to
Mm.
just say, this is what happened to me, and this is what I would like changed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Easy. I mean, it should be easy and it should be one of the things we just work into our week, right?
Well, yeah. Listen, everyone's living their life, and everyone
I
has
know.
work and soccer
Mm-hmm.
practice and dinner and laundry, and it's really hard. But taking a couple minutes to make a phone call, looking up online and then
Mm-hmm.
making a couple phone calls it can really make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. Have you read Jonathan Haidt's new book, Anxious Generation?
I have not yet.
Okay. Have you seen his 4 new norms that he recommends?
Yes,
Are you in favor?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's all over the place, huh?
Yeah.
I'm glad a lot of people we're getting a lot of eyes on this issue. One of the things that he recommends is phone-free schools, and that's something I've been sort of analyzing with the teachers I'm talking to, and I know you have experience in kind of educational technology. Um, so, how do you feel about the current state of tech use in schools, both smartphones being allowed or lackadaisically being restricted, or the school issued devices?
Well, just we've been fortunate with our schooling that they take whatever phones and devices the children bring from home and they
Okay.
hold on to them and then get them at the end of the day. I
Oh, good.
like that.
Yeah. Good.
So it provides some protection. Alice
Mm-hmm.
and Claire can get home, and if that, they can walk home from
Mm-hmm.
school, but we know where they are after school, but we know
Mm-hmm.
where they are while they're in school. And I would see the distraction of having that device that would be very harmful to their education and their
Yeah.
understanding of the curriculum and what they're trying to learn. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime you can remove distraction, which
Mm-hmm.
teenagers are prone to distraction anyway, so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
anytime you can remove that distraction, I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Yeah. And I know it's like 80% of schools technically have phone bans, but I've talked to teachers all over the country, and a lot of times the enforcement is left up to each individual teacher. So the kid's even allowed to bring it into the classroom, but has to have it away. And teachers don't want to have that contentious relationship with the student, or don't want to spend the entire class period trying to tell everybody to put their phones away like a game of whack-a-mole. So they're asking for things like take the phones at the front office. And a lot of the pushback comes from parents, that parents want to be able to communicate with their
Yeah,
children.
that's a thorny issue. I can understand wanting to, particularly with you know incidents that may happen at school. You want to be able to contact your child
Mm-hmm.
immediately if there's an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the risks of having that device minute by minute in a classroom and just seeing
Mm-hmm.
what happens. I mean, I think that's what you see amongst policymakers. They see their kids, they see their grandkids. They're trying to engage with their grandkids if they're a
Mm-hmm.
senator, and no one's paying attention to them because their
Mm-hmm.
kids are, their noses are on the screen and they're
Mm-hmm.
playing games or they're communicating with other children. So,
Yeah.
um, removing that distraction is essential, I think,
Yeah.
for education.
Okay. I agree. So putting the smartphones aside, when it comes to giving students technology to use in class, is there any guidance on the legislative side on what schools are supposed to be doing around this? Because it kind of feels like we're just buying technology and giving it to the kids without asking ourselves, like, is this what's best to help them learn?
Yeah, and it's interesting because there is a push and pull between the technology that can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I want my kids to know how to use all the technology out there because
Mm-hmm.
when they do enter the workforce, most
Mm-hmm.
likely they will be using email and
Mm-hmm.
communications tools.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there has to be a fine balance between the use of ed tech
Mm-hmm.
and traditional teaching without technology. There has to be a balance there. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that ed tech should supplant teaching in the classroom because
Mm-hmm.
we know
Yeah.
how impactful teachers can be on the lives of students. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be sitting in front of a computer screen. And there are a lot of ongoing studies right now at the federal public policy level
Mm-hmm.
trying to understand what happened during COVID and learning loss associated with children having 100% online schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And did they pay attention? Did they learn? Or
Right.
were they distracted?
Yeah.
And
Well,
so I think
yeah.
there has to be a balance because I
Mm-hmm.
think we want children to learn how to use the internet, put those guardrails around. We want
Mm-hmm.
children to understand AI and know that
Mm-hmm.
it's not, it's this, and it can be helpful. It's just a tool. It doesn't do everything for you. And I think
Mm-hmm.
those are the kind of lessons that you want to teach.
Yeah. And it's not even often the failure of like the educational technology. It's that they're accessing on those school devices all these other things because the school's not able to put strong enough guardrails around it. So they're watching Netflix in class and YouTube, and because they need YouTube for school, but then they're able to get, a lot of them have Facebook access. So the issue with the school devices is teachers are telling me maybe 50% of the time kids are using their school device for what they're supposed to be using, and some kids 100% of the time they're not
Yes.
using it correctly. So yeah, it's an issue, and I agree smartphones need to be out of their hands during class time. But yeah, the school issued device is like a whole other
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And I think, parents and teachers were forced into this
Mm-hmm.
compromise during COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
independent schools did very different things than public schools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so now we have kind of a model of, okay, what did work and what didn't. And I think it's going to take a little while for studies to happen and
Mm-hmm.
the ramifications of the decisions that were made to fully
Mm-hmm.
come to light. We're just starting to see some of the manifestations, even with our own children. Oh, maybe this didn't sink in, this
Mm-hmm.
lesson or this part of their education didn't sink in really well.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're using a system of education like we have in the United States, where it's all building blocks, it's all
Mm-hmm.
building upon the stuff in the past, if
Yeah.
you remove one of those blocks, then it makes it very difficult to catch up. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take a while to unpack and fully understand what happened during COVID
Okay.
and the learning loss that could have occurred.
Yeah.
And then we should take those models and use those to understand how much technology should be used. And just like everything else, I think it's all moderation.
Mm-hmm.
Everything should be used in moderation in terms
Right.
of, as I said, not supplanting
Mm-hmm.
true in-person education.
Right. Right. Okay. And I think parents could also bring up issues if they feel strongly about maybe the overuse of technology in school or the kids getting access to smartphones in school. Would that be something you'd go to house.gov and contact there, or is
Yeah.
it more of like a local
Yeah,
issue?
you could talk to, because the House of Representatives and Senate has jurisdiction over the Department of Labor and
Okay.
Education.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of those laws, they could have an impact and say that this is the way that we see the federal government should support education in certain
Mm-hmm.
ways. But
Mm-hmm.
that is more of a local issue, school board,
Yeah.
and state issue.
Okay.
I think you're starting to see some models of education that remove technology totally. And I think
Mm-hmm.
those might be options that parents might want to pursue if
Mm-hmm.
it's something that's happening in your local area.
Mm-hmm.
But you're starting to see some of those education opportunities pop up,
Mm-hmm.
where they remove technology and do everything paper based, like the kind
Yeah.
of old school way.
Yeah, so one of those is a Waldorf school, and I toured one recently. And I mean, they're not totally tech free. The high schoolers were working on a speech on their laptops, but very low tech. And so that school is $20,000 to $30,000 a year, but there are charter options that are available through federal funding, which I think is great. I'm gonna tour one of those soon, see what the difference is. I'm expecting there to be a difference in the paid option and the free option, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Um,
I think some
okay.
of those things are developing, and as
Yeah.
parents are understanding a little bit better what technology means. I think
Mm-hmm.
schools are trying to figure out technology. There's a technology budget in
Mm-hmm.
the federal budget for education, and they're trying to utilize those dollars a lot of times at the state and local school district level as best they
Mm-hmm.
can.
Yeah.
I think it's important to find a schooling system that you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even if you're in the public school system like we are, excuse me, like I've requested that they do a digital safety night for parents to, what are you teaching our kids about digital safety? What are they doing in the classroom? What do they have access to? Just open the communication between the school districts and the parents about what they're accessing at school. Because sometimes they're getting hours of screen time at school, and we need to know what they're accessing, consider that time in with what our home-based decisions are.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. We covered a lot today. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to share with parents?
No, I just want to reemphasize parents
Mm-hmm.
should engage, and it's your right as a citizen to engage. And
Mm-hmm.
I really encourage you to have those, as a parent, have those conversations with your local school board, let people know how you feel about things. It's
Mm-hmm.
important because the elected officials are supposed to be representing you as a constituent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I just think it's so important that the message here be like, we can bridge the gap between us parents and policymakers. It doesn't have to feel like they're strange, far off people making decisions that aren't in our best interest. So we should be having these conversations and extend these conversations out to parents that you are with and spending your time with. And Patrick, thank you for your time, and thank you for your work in empowering parents to kind of regain control of this tech world in our homes.
Yeah, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, educating parents and
Mm-hmm.
helping people understand what the harms are, but what the benefits are as well is really great. And I applaud
Thank
you
you.
for taking this on and doing so much work in this space.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it.